The early days of May 2025 saw a significant development in the relationship between the United States and Ukraine. President Trump finalized an economic cooperation deal with the war-torn nation, marking a new chapter in their complex history. This agreement, centered around mineral extraction and post-war reconstruction, has sent ripples across the geopolitical landscape, raising questions about its potential to reshape the ongoing conflict with Russia. The deal's announcement was met with a flurry of reactions, ranging from cautious optimism to outright skepticism. Proponents hailed it as a strategic masterstroke, a demonstration of American commitment to Ukrainian sovereignty and a potential catalyst for peace. Critics, however, voiced concerns about the deal's long-term implications, questioning whether it truly serves Ukraine's interests or merely advances American economic and geopolitical goals. At the heart of this agreement lies the promise of economic revitalization for a nation ravaged by years of conflict. Ukraine, endowed with rich deposits of critical minerals, stands to benefit from increased investment and development in its mining sector. The deal, however, is not without its critics, who argue that it could leave Ukraine vulnerable to exploitation, deepening its dependence on the United States. As the world grapples with the implications of this landmark agreement, one question looms large. Will this deal be remembered as a turning point in the pursuit of peace, or will it further entrench the existing divisions, pushing the region closer to the brink? The Trump administration has presented a united front in publicly praising the economic cooperation deal with Ukraine as a historic achievement. This deal, hailed as a significant diplomatic victory, has been showcased as a cornerstone of the administration's foreign policy. President Trump himself has touted the deal as a testament to his deal-making prowess and his commitment to securing peace in the region. He has emphasized the strategic importance of this agreement in stabilizing Eastern Europe and countering Russian influence. However, behind this facade of unity, whispers of dissent and disagreement echo through the corridors of the White House. These internal conflicts reveal a more complex and divided administration than what is publicly portrayed. Sources within the administration have revealed a deep rift between those who view the deal as a sufficient step towards resolving the conflict and those who believe it necessitates a more robust response, particularly towards Russia. This division has led to heated debates and strategic disagreements. This internal debate centers on the fundamental question of how best to engage with an increasingly assertive Russia and what leverage the United States possesses to deter further aggression. The stakes are high, and the decisions made could have far-reaching consequences. One faction, led by more hawkish voices within the administration, argues that the deal alone is insufficient to deter Russian aggression. They believe that a stronger stance is necessary to send a clear message to Moscow. They advocate for a more confrontational approach, including the imposition of harsher sanctions and increased military aid to Ukraine. This group sees military strength and economic pressure as the primary tools to counter Russian moves. They view the deal as a necessary but insufficient step, a means to bolster Ukraine's resilience while simultaneously raising the costs of conflict for Russia. Their strategy is to ensure that Russia feels the economic and military consequences of its actions. On the other hand, a more dovish contingent within the White House emphasizes the deal's potential to pave the way for a negotiated settlement. They argue that diplomacy and economic engagement are the keys to long-term stability. They believe that by engaging Russia economically and offering incentives for cooperation, the United States can nudge the Kremlin towards a more conciliatory stance. This approach focuses on building bridges rather than erecting barriers. They argue that a purely confrontational approach risks escalating the conflict and undermining any prospects for a diplomatic solution. The debate within the White House continues, reflecting the broader challenges of crafting a coherent foreign policy in a complex and rapidly changing world. The economic cooperation deal between the United States and Ukraine encompasses a range of provisions, each with potentially far-reaching consequences. This agreement is not just a simple trade deal. It represents a strategic partnership aimed at bolstering both nations' economic and geopolitical interests. At the forefront of this agreement lies the issue of mineral extraction rights, a key point of contention and a potential source of future friction. The mineral wealth of Ukraine is vast and largely untapped, making it a highly attractive target for foreign investment. The deal grants the U.S. preferential access to Ukraine's vast mineral reserves, particularly those deemed critical for emerging technologies and national security. These minerals are essential for the production of high-tech devices, renewable energy solutions, and advanced military equipment. While Ukraine retains ownership and control over its resources, the agreement stipulates that 50% of future revenue generated from new licenses for the exploration and extraction of these minerals, as well as oil and gas, will be directed to a joint investment fund. This fund is designed to ensure that the profits from these resources are reinvested into the country's development. This fund, jointly managed by the US and Ukraine, aims to finance the reconstruction of Ukraine's war-torn infrastructure and bolster its economy. The rebuilding efforts are expected to create jobs, improve living standards, and stimulate economic growth in the region. The US has committed to contributing to this investment fund, with the option to do so directly or through the provision of military assistance. This dual approach allows for a flexible response to Ukraine's immediate and long-term needs. This provision has drawn criticism from some quarters, who argue that it essentially equates financial assistance with military aid, potentially perpetuating the cycle of conflict. Critics fear that this could lead to an over-reliance on military solutions rather than diplomatic and economic ones. Proponents, however, argue that this flexibility allows the US to tailor its support to Ukraine's evolving needs. They believe that a combination of financial and military aid can provide a more comprehensive support system for Ukraine. The deal's emphasis on mineral extraction has raised concerns about potential environmental damage and exploitation. The environmental impact of large-scale mining operations cannot be ignored, as it poses significant risks to local ecosystems and communities. Critics argue that the agreement lacks sufficient safeguards to ensure responsible and sustainable mining practices, potentially jeopardizing Ukraine's fragile environment and the livelihoods of its people. They call for stricter regulations and oversight to prevent environmental degradation and ensure that mining activities benefit local communities. Unsurprisingly, the Kremlin has reacted with suspicion and hostility to the burgeoning economic partnership between the United States and Ukraine. This reaction is rooted in a long history of geopolitical rivalry and mutual distrust, which has only intensified in recent years. Russian officials have denounced the deal as a blatant attempt by the US to exert economic and geopolitical dominance over Ukraine, framing it as a form of neo-colonialism. They claim that this move is part of a broader strategy to encircle and weaken Russia. They argue that the deal undermines Ukraine's sovereignty and exacerbates tensions in the region. According to the Kremlin, this agreement not only destabilizes the area but also threatens the delicate balance of power that has been maintained. Despite a series of high-level meetings between President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, and Russian President Vladimir Putin, the Kremlin remains steadfast in its rejection of the US-backed peace proposal for Ukraine. These meetings, intended to bridge the gap, have instead highlighted the deep-seated mistrust between the two nations. This proposal, which calls for a freezing of the conflict along current lines, would effectively cede control of the contested territories to Russia, a concession Moscow seems unwilling to make. The Kremlin views this as a strategic disadvantage, fearing it would set a precedent for future conflicts. In the wake of the US-Ukraine deal, Russia has adopted a more assertive posture, intensifying its bombing campaigns in eastern Ukraine and hardening its negotiating position. This aggressive stance is seen as a direct response to what Russia perceives as encroachment on its sphere of influence. This escalation, coupled with bellicose rhetoric from Russian officials, suggests that the Kremlin views the deal as a provocation, a sign that the US is unwilling to accept Russia's sphere of influence and is actively working to counter its interests. The language used by Russian officials has become increasingly confrontational, reflecting the heightened tensions. The deal has further complicated the already fraught relationship between the United States and Russia, reducing the already limited avenues for dialogue and cooperation. Diplomatic channels that were once open are now strained, making it even more challenging to find common ground. It has also emboldened hardliners within the Russian government, who now feel vindicated in their belief that the West is actively seeking to weaken and isolate Russia. These hardliners are likely to push for even more aggressive policies, further escalating the situation. Sometimes the path to progress is not always smooth. We encounter challenges that can either propel us forward or hold us back. It's up to us to decide whether these obstacles become stepping stones or stumbling blocks. The choice, ultimately, is ours to make. In Washington, a rare moment of unity emerges. Both sides of the aisle are coming together, pushing for increased pressure on North Korea. It's not often that we see such bipartisan agreement, but the stakes are high and the urgency is palpable. Lawmakers are calling for tougher sanctions and more rigorous enforcement. They believe this is the only way to curb North Korea's nuclear ambitions. The international community is watching closely. The deal's implications extend far beyond the Korean peninsula. Allies and adversaries alike are recalibrating their strategies. In Europe, leaders are weighing the potential impact on NATO. In Asia, countries are reassessing their security policies. The ripple effects are being felt worldwide, and the geopolitical landscape is shifting in response. As President Trump approaches his 100th day in office, the administration is taking stock. The North Korea deal is a significant milestone, but challenges remain. The path forward is fraught with uncertainty. The administration is committed to a strategy of maximum pressure and engagement. They hope this approach will lead to a lasting solution, but only time will tell. The deal with North Korea casts a long shadow. Its success or failure will shape the region's future for years to come. The stakes are incredibly high and the world is watching. The lessons learned here will inform future diplomatic efforts. As the dust settles, one thing is clear. The impact of this deal will be felt for generations.